I want to give a piece today that's really, it's parshanut in the most parshanut sense. Okay, this is what you'll see a lot of the moderns doing, what Reb Yaakov does here. And I think it was very rare to find a Rosh Yeshiva to do something like this. If you're like, I know that Wayne is many times, he reads articles. So I would love to know if someone wrote this article up already, because it's, after I say it, it's going to be so obvious. And yet people sort of miss it because they don't look at the whole Sefer Yeshua as one chativa. But I want to add something at the end of this year, that it's going to be speculation about what Reb Yaakov would hold about the war today. So that's going to be speculation. I have grounds to speculate, but maybe talk about that. But it'll be speculation. So Reb Yaakov over here is going to be covering at least pieces of 4 or 5 chapters in Sefer Yoshua. Pieces of it, okay? But I want to do it a little bit different than the way Reb Yaakov sets it up, because Reb Yaakov doesn't set it up. He just had a chiddush and he started writing about it. It could be even that this is like in a few different places and stuff. But I want to do it a little bit more organized. Hopefully, this is the way Reb Yaakov would have done had he published an article, right? And I want to start by raising a number of questions, okay? So if you look at chapter Hey, where Reb Yaakov starts, chapter Hey in Yoshua, Pasuk Aleph, okay? Vayehi kishmoa kol malchei ha'amori asher be'ever ha'yarden yoma v'chol malchi ha'knani asher al hayam eis asher hovish Hashem es mei ha'yarden b'nei Yisrael ad Avram. And it was when the malchei ha'amori that were on the other side of Jordan, meaning our side, okay, Yoma, okay, the west side, where the Yam is, right? V'chol malchei Knan asher al hayam, and all the malchei Knan which were on the Yam, meaning on the coast. As asher hovish Hashem es mei yarden b'nei Yisrael, that God dried out the waters of the Yarden before the Jewish people. In other words, this is after the Jewish people cross over the Yarden, which looks a little bit like the crossing of the Yam Suf. Okay? Vayimas levavam v'lo hayibam od ruach mepnei b'nei Yisrael. And their hearts melted, and they didn't have any more a spirit before the Jewish people. Now, I want you to take note, and this is what Reb Yaakov is going to start with. It's a separate parsha. Okay, it's one pasuk, and it's got 2 stumos. It's a separate parsha. Okay, that's number one. So Reb Yaakov starts off by answering, why is it a separate little parsha? Right? Why isn't it just the beginning of chapter Hey? Okay. Second, okay, when God, we're going to go now to chapter 2. When God sends the spies, okay, when Yoshua sends the spies, right? So he sends 2 spies, right? And everybody asks the question, both, in Yoshua, and some people even in Bamidbar, they ask the question of, why did Yoshua send spies when the first sending of the spies was such a disaster? Okay, that's what do we usually say, that a person, what do they call insanity, is doing something that doesn't work and do it again, right? They expect different results. So why does Yoshua send these spies? That's number one. And what exactly did he want the spies to find out? Did he want it to be exactly like the last time, which didn't work, or something else? Okay, that's another question. Okay, what number 3 would be, the next question would be, the next pasuk in chapter Hey is like this. In other words, chapter Hey is that the Malchei Canaan, Malchei Amori heard, right, that God dried out the Jordan, right, split the Jordan, and their hearts melted. The next pasuk is Ba'etahi Amar Hashem El Yoshua Selecha Charvot Surim V'Shuv Molos Bnei Yisrael Shemes. here's where the Jewish people are commanded to finally do Milah. In the desert, the text keeps going on to say the Jews couldn't do Milah in the desert. For whatever reason, it was a sakana, whatever. Now, finally, the Jews are doing it. They didn't do it
with a rock.
What?
They're going to do with a rock.
With a rock, yeah. But a sharp rock. Okay?
Flintstones.
Yeah. But so why did Joshua to wait till now? Why is the next pasuk after this little parsha? And so Reb Yaakov is going to deal with that question. Okay, that's question 3. Question 4 is in chapter Zion. Okay, you know that what happened in Yericho, I think it's chapter Vav, was a tremendous miracle. The walls just caved in, and the Jewish people walked in there and just defeated all of Yericho, the armies of Yericho. The next chapter, right, is they go to Ai, right, and now they go on to fight the Ai, which is also a pretty big city, it seems like, right? But in between, a problem came up. Achan stole from the Cherem. He was not allowed to take from the Cherem, and he stole, correct? So what happens in Ai? They lose 36 people in Ai, okay? And Yoshua falls apart, okay? That's in chapter Zion, right? In chapter Zion, it first says, beginning of chapter Zion, that the Jewish people stole from the Cherem. Vayikach Achan, right? Ben Karmi, Ben Zavdi, right? Ben Acherem, Vayichaf, Hashem Bnei Israel. And then the next pasuk is that Yoshua sent from Yericho. Someone comment anything over there? Okay. Yoshua sent from Yericho to go fight with the Ai, right? And he loses. What happens? Yoshua then really sort of gets very confused what's going on over here, right? And in Pasuk Zion, Yoshua says to God after they lose the war, Vayomer Yoshua ha oivei Hashem Elokim loma ha'avarta ha'avir et ha'am hazeh et ha'yarden l'teit otam b'yad ha'mori lavidenu v'luo alnu neshev be'var ha'yarden. Why did you bring us over the Jordan so we should lose? Right? It was better we would stay on the east side of Jordan, where we were victorious, and start a state over there. What are people going to say after the Jews ran away from the Ai? Right? Then the Canaanites are basically going to feel that they can attack us, right? And they'll destroy our name from the land, and what will happen to your great name? And of course, God then tells Yoshua, what are you crying about? Right? Get up and fix it. Okay? There's a problem here. Okay? And then he fixes it. Okay? So, in chapter Zion, at the beginning, of chapter Ches, right? It says, God says, after Yoshua fixes what he has to fix, right? In chapter Ches, God says, Vayomer Hashem al Yoshua, beginning of chapter Ches, Al tirov al techos kachim chet ama milchama, et kol ama milchama, the whole army, v'kum alei ai re'ei natati b'yitcha et melech ai, v'et amo, v'et iro, v'et arzo. V'asita l'ai u'malka kasher asita l'iricho u'malka. Rak shlo l'vemta tavos lachem simlacha orev l'ir me'achareha. Okay? God says, don't worry. Not everything is fixed. Take the army, go up to Ai, and you're going to conquer them, no problem. And then God adds something at the end of the pasuk. Simlacha orev l'ir me'achareha. Put an ambush. Okay? Now, this is very strange, Reb Yaakov says, right? I don't get it. Now that we have not sinned, you don't need an ambush. Now you go in and be victorious. God's on your side. That's number one. Number two, when was the last time you saw that God taught us how to fight a war? He showed us, a nice plan. Make an ambush. I mean, that we got officers here. We got Yeshua. We got officers. We know what we have to do. So number one, why do you need an ambush if God is on our side? Number two, why doesn't God mind his own business about how to fight a war? Okay, that's number four. Number five, that's 4 and 5. Number 6 has to do with chapter 10.
Yeah. What's 4? What's 4 and what's 5?
4 is that why does God?
What do you need
why do they need an ambush? Right. That's 4. Why do they need an ambush? God says make an ambush. 5 is right. Why is God mixing in to tell us we need an ambush? Right? Well, why? We don't know how to fight a war. The Jews don't know how to fight wars. God has tell us all the tachsisei milchama. Right? So that's 4 and 5 according to Reb Yaakov. 6 is chapter Tet. Okay, chapter Tet is the famous story about the Givonim, right? And the Givonim, you remember they make believe they're from a different country. They dress in clothing that is old, right? And use the clothing, right? It's worn out, the clothing, right? And they tell Yeshua they're from another place. Then they came to meet Yeshua and the Jewish people, even though they're from Givon, which is, of course, right near Givat Zev, right? There's Givon HaYashan, Givon HaChadash, right? But they want to hide it. So what does it say at the beginning of chapter 10? Vayihi kishmo kol ha'malachim asher b'eivar hayardim b'hor b'shvila b'chol chof hayam hagadol el mul ha'levanan hachiti Amori haknani haprizi hachivi vayivusi vayiskaptzu yachdu lechem im Yoshua v'Yisrael pe'achad. Right? They all gathered together now. Right? Till now they were separate countries, separate nations, gathered together to fight the Jews pe'achad. Vayoshvei givon shamues asher asa Yoshua liyericho ula'ai. And they saw, the Yoshvei Givon heard, what Joshua did to the Yericho and the Ai, Vayasu Gamhema Ba'arma. And they also did a trick. They also did it deviously. And then it tells you the story, what they did. They disguised themselves. So Reb Yaakov wants to know, what does this mean? Gamhema Ba'arma. They also did Ba'arma. Who else did Ba'arma? Who else? They did Ba'arma, not they also did Ba'arma, right? Okay, so now let's take a look at the piece, now that you have all those questions.
Can we answer the questions, please?
Sure, 100%. The first question is, why is this a parsha, a one-pasuk parsha? And as you know, we had already in Sefer Shmuel, when it's a one-pasuk parsha, you know it's going to give you a yesod. That's Reb Yaakov's always. Whenever you see a one-pasuk parsha, it's a yesod in Tanach. Okay, that's number one. Number two, why does Yeshua send spies after the first time the spies were not successful? Did they have a different goal than the first spies? That's 2. Number 3, how does the pasuk in chapter Hey, the next pasuk after that little parsha says, Ba'esahi, Yoshua did a milah. How does that follow from the last pasuk? Ba'esahi did a milah. Okay, that's number 3. Number 4 is after the Jews fix what they had to do with regard to Achan, right? God then says to Yoshua, don't worry, you're going to win this war, take the army, I'm going to knock them out, no problem. But he says, make an ambush, but an Orev, right? So number 4 is, why do the Jews need an Orev? God can conquer the land without an Orev, right? Even there's a wall, all of a sudden the wall falls down. He doesn't need an Orav, number one. Number two, if they need an Orav, right, all of a sudden God's getting involved in how to set up wars. I mean, we could use that even today. I can't have to admit, but that's not supposed to be like that. Okay, so that's number 5. Number 6 is, what does it mean by that? The Gevonim said Vayasu gam heim ba'arma. They also did ba'arma, right? And they tricked. They did ba'arma. They tricked Yoshua for sure. He bought into it. But what is also they did? What's the other armor before this that it says they also did ba'arma? Okay, so now Reb Yaakov says the following thing: Parsha zu shekula pasuk echad bilvad mishameshes kedugma eich shechalukas haprokim shel hanotzrim kapitlach mevalbelas et hakorim. This parsha of one pasuk, it could be used as a dugma. By the way, Reb Yaakov used to give this shiur for Tanach teachers. Okay, and I think Reb Yosef found one place where he gave it. Bogrei Torah Masora al ofen sheyesh lamed Tanach. Okay, so he uses this as the mashal. There's a few other places where Yaakov used to give shiurim to tell you how to learn up Tanach and teach Tanach. Okay, he says this pasuk the Christians confuse us with. The Hainu heim tzarfu pasuk ze im apsukim abom leperek echad ukilu shezu chativ achat. This is the first pasuk of the chapter, and the next psukim are part of the chapter, right? So they added it all together, made it into one parak, and as if it's one section. Ulam be'emes pasuk zehu yisod musad merkazi b'fnei atzmo l'chol haprokim abom. The reason why this is a parsha b'fnei atzmo, because this is a pasuk that is the yisod musad, the foundation, the central foundation for all the prakim that are coming. It's not just Agdama for the continuation of this parak, right? It doesn't stand with the rest of this parak. It stands alone. And Rabbi Yaakov had it in for the Christians because he felt that the way they set up the prakim, like he says over here, confused us. And many times Rabbi Yaakov points this out. Pasuk say he no parsha b'fnei atzmo. Vayesod shel parsha zu who? Now he's going to give you the sod. Ech be'etzem hayatzorach le'raos kivush Eretz Yisrael b'li hitnagdut mamashit mitzad HaKnanim. How, in essence, was supposed to look the conquering of Israel without any sort of standing against us of the Canaanim, meaning. In other words, the Canaanim would not be able to stand up against us at all. They couldn't stand up against us. That's what this tells me, this parsha. Okay? Bira Inyan. Now I'm going to explain it. The name of Ur La'el. Kasher Asa Hashem Elokeichem Liamsuf Asher Ovish Mipanenu Adav Reinu Leman Das Kol Amei Haaretz Es Yad Hashem Ki Chazakei. What does it say over there? If you remember, after they crossed the Jordan, they put up a statue, not a statue, but a monument, really, that they crossed the Jordan, to remember that they crossed the Jordan. So they take stones out of the Yarden and they set them up as a memory. So what does it say over there? Over there in chapter Dalet, Pasuk Kaf Gimel, it says what it also says, Takin Argodah in the Chumash about Argodah Shel Pesach. Right? It says like this. Vayomer b'nei Yisrael lemer, and God said to the children of Israel, this is chapter Daled Pasuk Chaf Aleph, Asher yishalun b'neichem machar es avosam lemer ma avanu elu, that your children will ask you machar. It sounds mamish just like in the Chumash by Yitzias Mitzrayim. Ma avanu elu, right? Right? It says over there also this language of ma avoda hazel lachem, right? Vodatem es b'neichem lemer bayabosha var Yisrael es hayarden hazeh asher hovish Hashem Elokeichem es mei hayarden mipneichem ad avrechem kasher asa Hashem Elokeichem liyamsuf asher hovish mipanenu ad avreinu. In other words, just like he did to the Yam Suf, he did here, which means there has to be a connection between the Yam Suf and the Yarden. Not just they both got split, but there's an idea here. And God goes into the idea. Leman das kol amei haaretz es yad Hashem ki chazokehi leman yiratem et Hashem Elokechem kol hayamim. Right? So here Reb Yaakov says, going back to Reb Yaakov, after he quotes this pasuk, Shematoras kriyas yamsuf hoise shabtipol alehem a mosav afachad ad yavar. Okay? Now, if you remember the Oz Yashir, right? The Oz Yashir we always learn is a shir that the Jewish people said because they were saved from Egypt, which is true. But if you think about it, there's a problem in the shira. Okay? The problem in the shira is the first half of the shira talks about Egypt trying to attack us, and they're sinking, and the waters are overflowing on them, right? And that the whole shira is supposed to be about Egypt, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the shira, okay, or towards the end of the shira, okay, Shomu amim yor gorzun, chil achaz yoshvei peloshas, oz nefalu alufei edom, ele moav yechazeim roat, namogu kol yoshvei chanan, tipol aleim a mosav afachad. What's going on over here? We started with the shira about Egypt. Susvar achvoy ramav ayom, markavos paro, umavchar sholishav, tomos yechasyumu, Yeminu Hashem Nadori Bakoyach, right? Going Chataros Kamechet Shlach Haroncha Kakash, right? It's all about Egypt, right? Destroying Egypt. At the end, he starts talking about all the other nations, right? So Reb Yaakov is about to sort of answer that question. Okay, why is it? Because he says, if you look in the Tanach, there were two ideas on why you needed Kriyas Yam Suf. One was the basic idea to destroy Egypt. But there was also another idea, and that's the end of the Shiva. So he says, "Shemataras kriyas Yam Suf haisa shetipa aleim mosav afachad ad yover abcha. Hainu shetochnid hamilchama be'etzem haisa l'chbosh Eretz Yisrael b'li hisnagdut." That was the idea, to conquer Eretz Yisrael without, what do we call it, hisnagdut in English? Without
Opposition.
an opposition. That's exactly right. Opposition, right? No opposition. That's what we're supposed to conquer. And that's the yesod of this little parsha here in Sefer Yoshua, right? The yesod is at the beginning of chapter Hey, right? Vayik Yishmo Chol Malchei Amori Asher Ba'evra Yardei, right? They heard Asher Hovish Asher Erdem, right? Vayimas levavim v'lo yayabem od ruach mepnei bnei Yisrael. V'zeh ma she'Amalek kilkel, and this is what Amalek. This is sort of parenthetic statement. What Amalek undermined, right? Shepatach b'milchama im Yisrael acharei kriyas Yam Suf u'k'may shekosav Rashi shoyo akim yireim lilachem b'chem u'bo zeh v'itchil. Right? What did Amalek do? Everybody was scared to death of the Jews. It says Ammon, Moab, Edom, Canaan, Yoshvei Canaan. They're all scared. That's what it says in the Shira. Comes along Amalek, and the Gemara gives that famous mashal, right? Mashal, Rashi brings it. Lambate rotachas she'ein kol ber yechol le'reit. Right? Betocha, right? Boa ben Belial echad kofatz v'yorad l'tocha afal pi shenichva hikra so b'fnei acherim. In other words, it was like a mashal of a hot bath, a boiling bath. No one could go in there, and who jumps in? Amalek, right? He kofatz and he gets burnt, but he cools it off everybody else, right? V'hine achareisha hiku sichon va'og chazav asa kadosh baruch hu kines kriyas Yam Suf bavrom et hayarden kedei lechamem et hambate. What did God do? He, after he had to get back into the nations, the deterrent, right? So they'd be scared to death, right? How did he do that? With Og and Sichon, right? And also to split the Yarden again, right? To split the Yarden like he did to the Yamsuf, right? V'zeh be'etzem ma sheYoshua shalach meraglim k'dei levdok im ha'knanim heim b'matzav nafshi k'mo shenema b'shiras hayam. Are they now in the matzav nafshi, meaning are they depressed, right? Psychologically, like in when Shiras acharei kriyas Yamsuf no mogu kol yoshvei Canaan. All the natives of Canaan after Kriyas melted. They all melted away. So the spies were not sent like the first spies. They were sent for one simple reason, to see if psychologically, right, the people are able to fight a war or no. They're just too scared, right? They have no more courage left in them. They are what we would call paralyzed, right? And why does Yoshua send them? Because he wants to know if there was this deterrent, right? The deterrent was still sort of there, right? So he sends the spies to know, right? And you see that there was no other reason to send them, because the way they went is the way they came. Think about it. He sends spies. They get to Rachav's house, right? And the people of Yericho, the armies of Yericho, get word that the spies of Israel in Yericho. She hides them, right? Rachav hides them. So they go chasing after the spies who are still in Rachav's house. And she goes and gives them a whole speech about how she feels about the Jewish people, right? So what does it say? And then they left. So where did they spy out the land? They came to Rachav's house, right? She hid them. In the morning, they're out of there. They're going back to Israel. What happened? They didn't spy out the land, right? So Reb Yaakov says, of course they did, because the goal was to find out what the people were psychologically capable of as far as war was concerned. Al korchach shemator shiluach hamaraglim haishal l'shmo masha Rachav amra. Rachav already told him. What did she say? Yodati ki nasan Hashem lochem et haaretz v'chi nofla emaschem alechem v'chi namogu kol yoshvei haaretz b'pneichem. What did Rachav say? Exactly what it says. No mogu kol yoshvei Canaan. Right? What God says in the Shira, Moshe says in the Shira, Rachav says here, Nofle maschem aleinu, your trepidation has come upon us, and we are all melted. Kol yoshvei Canaan as well. Mipneichem. Ki shamanu es Hashem ovish Hashem es mei yamsuk mipneichem b'tzeischem mitzrayim v'asher asol l'shtei malchei amori asher be'ever hayardei l'sichu la'og. In other words, she says two things. We heard what God did to the Yamsuf. By the way, if she heard about that, you know how many years it's been? 40 years. 40 years since it's been. Okay? And they still remember it. That's a pretty good trick. Okay? 40 years. And then she says, and we heard what you did to Og and Sichon, right? That's what she says to them, and that happened quite recently. And we heard, and our hearts sunk. Okay, our hearts sunk. Here you got it. And no one has the oomph anymore, the spirit to stand before you. Meaning, there's no hitnagdut, right? There's no fight over it. They just feel paralyzed. They lost all their courage and their will to fight. They are petrified. Okay?
Demoralized.
Why
demoralized. That's a great word. They are completely demoralized. That's a perfect word.
Why is it that she mentions the Kriyas, splitting the Kriyas Yamsuf 40 years ago, not the Kriyas of the Yarden?
Look at the next line, Mike.
Right.
Okay. V'chi amra, it said, O terem shenichras hayarden lifnechem. They hadn't gone over the Jordan yet. Remember, he sent the spies over the Jordan, but they hadn't gone. So Reb Yaakov was pointing out that this made such a great impression that you didn't have to worry, right? For the Jewish, you didn't have to worry about this war. V'hine b'kriyas Yamsuf husku shtei matarot. There were two matarot. Sheyu yureim mehem kol yoshvei Canaan, kanisker la'el. Right? In other words, that was number one from the Shira. And again, I want to point out, Reb Yaakov's dealing with the end of the Shira. Obviously, the first part of the Shira is about Egypt. And that's what we always think, that the second part is like sort of, Agav. No, Reb Yaakov would say it's not Agav. It was completely another reason why we made the Kriyas Yamsuf, was in order to demoralize the Shivas Amid. She'aminu b'Hashem Moshe Avdo. That's what it said. V'aminu Hashem Moshe Avdo. That was one reason for Kriyas Yamsuf. Kasher chazav v'asalam HaKadosh Baruch Hu nes. So Kriyas Mei Yardun husku shuv otong shtei hatotzaot. The two totzaot again happened here. Ha'ashniya k'moshe kasafti la'el dalad yidal bayomu gidel Hashem es Yoshua b'nei kol Yisrael. What did it say after the Jordan was split? In that day, God made the name of Yoshua, right? He made Yoshua a great person in the eyes of Jewish people. He made him much greater. Vayiru oso kasher yuras Moshe kol mechav. The point of, like Kriyas Yamsuf, Vayiminu b'Hashem Moshe Avdo. Now Kriyas Yarden was the same thing, but for Yoshua. Ushteim gam yachad k'moshe kasafti la'el. Leman das kol am me'oretz asher yad Hashem. Like I wrote before at the beginning, Leman das kol am me'oretz es yad Hashem ki chazokehi leman yirasem es Hashem elokechem kol hayamim. Two things. One, that the people of the land should know that God is strong. And two, it's also for the Jewish people that they should have the fear of God. Right? So that's what Reb Yaakov said before, that they're gonna fear. He wants it to be in awe of Yehoshua, like there was in awe of Moshe, and that's why Yeshua had to be in charge of splitting the Yarden, and also, of course, that the Amei Haaretz, the nation of the land, would see that God's hand is strong. V'zos hanekuda shel parsha bat pasuk echad lamed shetotzaa azot achen huzka. That's the point of this parsha. This parsha says, we go back to the parsha, Vayimas levavim lo'hoya bam od ruach m'bnei Yisrael. Their hearts melted, right? After they saw that God dried out the Jordan, and they didn't have any more the spirit, meaning the what? What did we say before? They didn't have the courage and the spirit anymore to fight the Jewish people. Well, if he's moving, now we understand why the next pasuk is Ba'etahi. At this time, Dafka, they were mal, not before. For who? Sharach shav Zman Mila, right? Zman Lamul Sharei Belamid Yom Shalvelis Yochlu Lamul Darei Ovel Chai B'Mila. Well, there was 30 days that they were mourning for Moshe, correct? That's the way the Sefer Yoshua starts after those 30 days. Well, they had 30 days to do Mila. How come they didn't do Mila? Right? Ovel is Chai B'Mila. If you get a nice Russian guy, he's sitting Shiva after his father. He didn't have Mila. He doesn't have to wait till after the Shiva. He can do the Mila. He's supposed to do the Mila right away. Ovel Chai B'Mila. Mikol Macham Lo Mol Bnei Shasha Sakana. Shagoyim Yasulem K'moshe Asu Shimon V'Levi L'ir Shechem. Why couldn't they do Mila? Because they were afraid that the nations, they don't know what the nations are thinking. What happens when our enemies want to attack us? They pick the time when we're most weak. Yom Kippur, Simchas Torah, right? When we have Mila, Brit Mila, because the Jewish people remembered what happened with Shimon and Levi, right? What happened with Shem. They did Milah, and then Shimon and Levi went in there and just destroyed the whole city. Sharei kol ha'am ha'yu avalachshav shenofel pachad ve'em al kol ha'gayim yochlu kvar lamul. That's the next pasuk, ba'etahi, right? At this time, right? Even though it's a parenthetic statement, right? It's a parenthetic paragraph, right? About Milah, right? But the point over here is that at this time, after the nations got frightened, ba'etahi dafka, you could do Milah now. You have nothing to worry about.
Well,
okay? Lefi zeh, kishenikach parsha ketana zu, kireka lechol hemshech hamilchama b'knanim. Therefore, when we take this parsha as a background, the reka for all that is happening, the lechol hemshech hamilchama b'knanim navin et kol sipor milchemes ha'ir I v'neyashev kamet. Now you can understand what happened in I. Tehine, acharei shenaflu shlosha v'shisha anashim nifal Yoshua. 36 people would die. K'moshe kosav sham. Vayimas levav ha'am vayihi l'mayim. The Jewish people's heart sang, and it became water. Vayikra Yoshua simloso vayipol al panav arza vayomer Yoshua. Lama he'avarta ha'avir et ha'am hazeh et ha'yardei l'teiktotan b'yada ha'mori la'avidenu v'lua alnu v'neshei bevar yardei. Yoshua gets very upset and confused, and he says, "Why'd you bring us over?" Why is Yoshua getting so upset? For tamua she'omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, come on, simcha orev la'ir me'achareha. You should make an orev. He says, Yoshua, you didn't know how to fight a war. I'm going to teach you how to fight a war. Right? What's going on over here? Move on. Shemapelas ai hoysa bekoch l'shanos es kol ma'aracha milchama. Shachshav ra'u hakananim shegam b'nei Yisrael heim b'nei temuta. Now that they lost an eye, what did they say? The people of Ai, the Canaanites, what did they say? Wait a minute, Jews are also mortal. We thought they're immortal. They're also mortal. You see, they lost 36 men and they ran away. Hafach Yisrael orif l'fnei oivav. Jews ran away. V'chol ha'roshim shel krisus mei ha'yardim amul lafog. Right? All the impression that of splitting of the Jordan was about to fall out. Basically, it was about to fall apart. All that they got, that deterrent, right? That they made, is about to fall apart because they see the Jews can also lose people, right? You remember, we'll talk about it in a minute, but just remind yourself what the Hamas did first and foremost was to show you guys are not Samson. We did it, right? We may have lost, but we did it. We showed you could be attacked, and we could lose a ton of people, and we could make you get down on your knees. And we haven't yet made them get down on their knees. They've made us get down on our knees. Okay? So it's not enough now to win the war. Right? We'll talk about this. Now we finished with Ochad. How are we going to have a deterrent again? How do we create a deterrent? How do we create the nations in Canaan being petrified? Since that's the sort of how you have to fight the war, is that they have to be too petrified to stand up to you. Okay? Dahainu, Shem Yachshavu ki yomru nasim lefanenu kasher b'rishana v'nasnu lefnem. We're going to run away from them. Umamela Yachshavu shebnei Yisrael l'chatchilu hikrivu lamed vav anashim l'mana Kasim. They're going to now think, you know why God told them to Orev? To get back to the Torah. How do you get back to the Torah? If you make an Orev, right? And the Jewish people, the Orev is behind the city, okay? And the Jewish people are fighting and they come to the city and they start running away. And of course, I said, Oh, they're running away again like they did. Let's run after them and kill them. And all of a sudden, from the back, the Orev comes into the city, and now they're sandwiched between two Jewish armies. Right? Now what do they think, Reb Yaakov says? Now I understand why the Jews lost the 36 people. They gave up 36 people in order to make this Orev, in order to make this Tachsis Milchama. Right? So they didn't think the Jews really lost the first war. That was all a way to make us think that we won. And now that they attacked them with the Orev, with the ambush, it brought back, because now we see how smart the Jews are, right? There was a real problem, okay, with the Jewish people with regard to Hamas, and even worse with regard to Hezbollah, because Hezbollah said, "What do you mean? If the Hamas can attack and do such a good job, let's attack from the north." Except one change happened. There was, right, an Orev. It's called beepers. Okay, that was the Orev. That's the beepers. Okay, once the beepers happen, there goes the whole the torrent. Man, they were like floored. Those 2 days in a row. Well, the first day was beepers. The second day was something else.
Walkie-talkies.
The phone. What?
Walkie-talkies.
Walkie-talkies. Right. So that the point is when you have something that that completely petrifies the nation, it's very easy to win. They don't have to fight 14 months in with Hezbollah. It was a couple of weeks. Okay, so this is what Reb Yaakov says. 1 second. So now we understand why there was an ambush to bring back the deterrent, and that they shouldn't realize that the Jews are mortal also. They should say they're very brilliant. And now I'm going to be var what it says further on. Vayoshev Givon, excuse me, Shamu es asher aso Yoshua Yericho la'ai, Vayasu gam heim ba'arma. What does it say? The Yoshua Givon heard what Yoshua did to Yericho and Ai. Oh, the deterrent is back. They're putting Yericho together with Ai. The victory of Yericho is the same as the victory of Ai is the same as Yericho. Vayasu gam heim ba'arma. V'kam omdu amafarshim v'chazal mi oda sa'arma shekenegdam kosher shegonim gabkein asu arma kamosa. Who else did an arma? Well, lefia niskalel nir shekavanas apasik shem asu gabkein ba'arma kafit fisasam shebnei Israel asu ba'arma b'kivush. Ahai, the Jews, in order to conquer Ai, they had to do an arma, a trick. What did they trick? They lost 36 people in order for Ai to think we're going to be victorious over them. They're mortal, and then they had a plan the whole time, and they used the plan. By the way, Reb Yaakov, I skipped into parentheses at the end of the last paragraph. Masha kamuvan. The Jews would never, he says, give up 36 people, let them be killed, sacrifice 36 people in order to be victorious. But as far as the Goyim are concerned, you know that giving up 36 people for the Goyim is nothing, right? It's easy to complain that they lost 25,000 people, which probably 3/4 of them are terrorists. But you know that Hamas couldn't care less about kids dying and women dying. That's all Baba Mises, right? That's the way the nations are. They said the Jews gave up 36 people in order to do this brilliant plan. Okay, so that's Vayasu Gam Heim Arma. They also did an arma, just like Yoshua did an arma. Right after that pasuk that they did, they heard what they did to the Ai. Right, Vayasu Gam Heim Arma. They heard how did they do it to the Ai? With an arma, with an ambush, with a trick. So they also did a trick. Right? Kafiti some Shabnei Yisrael asu ba'arma kivush Ai. Shehem chashu shamapala b'tchila haisa arma kol taktika. It was like a tactic. Avol be'emes he haisa mapola mitish hakadosh baruch hu yitzarach l'teit eitzakei l'chasot aleh. It really was. The Jewish people really did lose the first war, but God wanted to make sure there wouldn't be a chilul Hashem. So then God had to get involved. ולקח הקדם ששומע כל מה שנעשה ליריחו לעי, שגם את המלחמה בעי, פירשם כי ניצחון גמור, שלא כדרך הטבע כמו יריחו, בלי שום מפלה מתחילה. Okay? That is the parshanut of Reb Yaakov. Okay? Does everybody got it? Because it takes a lot of different, but it's basically one idea, that little chapter in Hay is how the war of Canaan has to be fought. And you see it constantly, that the same words are being used the whole time. Yimas levavam, v'lo kama od ruach be'ish, right? It's constantly in all those places that we mentioned, the same thing is going on all the time. So you see, and even with the Meraglim, right? What did the Meraglim say to Yoshua when they get back from Yericho, right? I'll tell you exactly what they say to Yeshua, and you'll see Reb Yaakov was 100% right. Here, Vayomer Yeshua, that's end the chapter bet. When they get back from Yericho, Ki nasan Hashem b'yadeinu et kol haaretz, v'gam namogu kol yoshvei haaretz mipaneinu. The whole land, the whole inhabitants of the land have melted before us. Oh, why are they bringing that in? The answer is that's what they went for. They went for it. Don't worry. Everybody is scared to death. They're petrified. They're paralyzed, basically. You have nothing to worry about. Where did they find that out from? They found it out from Rachav. She's the one who told it to them, right? And why does Rachav know about it? So that Rashi already says, right, that Rachav knows about it because Rachav was she wasn't a prostitute. She was, what do you call a high-level prostitute? What? There's a high-level prostitute. There's a word for it. I forget the word. What?
A call girl.
A call girl. You have to make an appointment and everything, right? She was running a very profit industry. Escort is usually good, right? An escort, right? That's what she was. Who used to go there, Rashi says? There wasn't one Sar or Melech that didn't go visit Rachav. But then she says, Lokoma Ish, right? Lokoma, what does it say over there? Lokoma, Rashi over there comments, Lokoma Od Ruach Beish. No one's been coming to me. They're just so depressed. They don't even want to have sex anymore. That's how depressed they are. That's what Rashi says, right? So, En Kol Sar Umoshel that didn't come to Rachav, Rashi says. So that's why they went there. They wanted to see. They wanted to hear what politically is going on. They heard what they needed. They went back and they told Yoshua. So that's really the whole idea over here. What did I want to add over here? I said to you, I'm going to speculate. I believe that this is what Reb Yaakov wants the war to look like in Israel. He wants the people to be so completely demoralized that they're scared to death, petrified, and paralyzed. And every time Israel wins a war, they don't succeed in doing that. And that's not winning a war. This is winning a war. And I believe that's what Reb Yaakov would take from here. That if you really want to win a war against the enemies that we have, right? The non-Western enemies, right? Those crazies, right? Those fanatics, that's the only way to do it. Now, if you ask some Arabs, they've already said this, right? They have to lose the land. They have to be completely demoralized. They have to put up a white flag. Until they put up a white flag, you didn't win. Until they say stop, right? You didn't win, right? And the Israel never seems to be able to finish to that point, right? And I believe that's what Reb Yaakov holds you have to do. And if you do that, you won't hear from them for a very long time.
What do you mean if we give 50 terrorists for every one hostage, that's not going to strike fear to their hearts?
Right. It's them controlling us no matter how you look at it, right? When you flatten Gaza and you don't let Trump take it over because you take it over, and the Azans are sitting on the border of Egypt and they're setting up tents for the next 100 years, then you know that they're gonna put up the white flag. Okay, that's when the white flag goes up. Okay, in the 6-Day War, the white flag went up. It did go up, the white flags. But what Moshe Dayan do? He took it down. took down the white flags. They ran away. He said, please come back. Right? And by the way, this has been, in 1948, it was also hundreds of thousands of Arabs ran away. And Ben Gurion wouldn't let them settle the land where the Arabs ran away. He says, we're saving for them when they come back. Okay? This is what we call retarded to the highest degree. Okay? Anyway, this is what I believe Reb Yaakov is saying over, but it's a great piece of Parshanut without the message that it's giving us. Okay, it's a great piece of Parshanut. Any questions? Any points?
Yeah, for sure. Big Chidushim.
Okay, I think it will end with a bombshell. Go ahead.
Are we meeting next week?
Next week I already won't be here. So that'll be a very difficult thing because I'll be 7 hours behind you. Yeah. Right? So I don't know if I'll be able to get it all together. Not having my computer. And
after Pesach.
After Pesach.
Yeshur koach. Chag kasher v'sameach.
Chag kasher v'sameach.
Guys. Be well. Take care.
Good.